Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Hey y'all, I'm Frank King, and welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and yes, hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week. A dazzling 10-day spectacle of architecture, martinis, lectures, art, architecture movies, parties, tours, exhibits, and the occasional plastic surgery gone awry. Our own George Smart was there talking poolside with keynote speakers, authors, and special guests during the entire week of Modernism Week. It's a tough job, but hey, I was busy, so somebody else had to do it. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll, your highly trained special agent for bringing modernist design expertise to buyers and sellers. You can reach Angela at angelaroll.com, that's roll, R-O-E-H-L, or give her a ring at 919-995-0550. Today is all about landscape design because lush, beautiful walkways and gardens don't build themselves. George welcomes landscape architect Nate Cormier discussing the Illuminaire House in Palm Springs. And later on, landscape architect Michelle Delk of Snohetta drops by to share a new project in Oregon's Willamette Valley. Hey, I live in Willamette Valley. I got to check that out. In the meantime, let's go to Palm Springs.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, coming to you poolside from the Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs during Modernism Week. It's a little brisk out here. It's kind of a record cold, which for them means it's 65 degrees and feels like 45 outside unless the sun is shining directly on you. My guest today is Nate Cormier, who is a principal with Rios Clemente Hale Studios in Los Angeles. Nate is involved with the Illuminaire House project here in Palm Springs. This is a house by Albert Frey and Lawrence Coker that was moved here last year from New York. A very significant experimental house, it was called at the time, the House of the Future, that was visited by tens of thousands of people during a World's Fair. It had an up and down history and was eventually disassembled, and it's still disassembled. It's in a truck, awaiting its rebirth over the next year or two in a special park that Nate's firm is going to be working with to bring to new glory. That lot has been a wreck for years and years with failed projects and concrete everywhere, and now it's going to come back beautifully. Welcome, Nate.
Hi. Happy to be with you.
So tell us just a little bit in general about the Frey House and why it's important to create a nice space around it.
Let me give you a little bit of context first. I'm with Rios Clemente Hale Studios. It's a firm in LA, founded about 30 years ago. And we're a pretty eclectic bunch. Our design studios include architects, landscape architects, interior designers, product designers. We make the coffee cups down at Cheeky's down the street here, all the way to surfboards, fashion, theaters, parks, towers. And so we really think of ourselves as a very LA design house. And we were selected to design a new Central Park for Palm Springs. This is a part of the region that we do much of our work in, and so we were very interested in coming up with a design for the park that connects people who are visiting Palm Springs to the larger natural landscape. There's an incredible layering of cultural, architecture, performing arts, artwork that's happening here in the desert, but there's also an intrinsic landscape, experiences that people have when they go out on a hike to Tequit's Falls or Indian Canyons, and we want to take a little bit of that landscape and bring it into the heart of the city. And then, as an additional layer to the park, there are these cultural features like the Illuminaire House, which are going to be, this is going to be their permanent home. And one interesting challenge, we're big fans of modern architecture. We work on adapting some amazing old homes, folks like Lautner, and we have a contemporary modern architecture practice as well. But this is an interesting architectural challenge because This was a project that was designed to be mobile. It was built on the East Coast. It has it's a house, right? It was meant to be this like example of modern living that was residential. So it wasn't conceived as a pavilion in a park. It wasn't conceived for 120 degree plus summers here in Palm Springs. So we had to think about how to situate it within the park in a way that would highlight it, elevate it, allow it to have its own appropriate context. So we have, I'm using my hands, I apologize, but we've got a big piece of the park.
They're great visuals here. You just have to imagine these as we go along.
In between the main drag of Palm Springs, Canyon Drive, and the Art Museum, where this whole district of redevelopment is happening, this Central Park is going to be the heart of that new district. And there's a main piece right in front of the museum, and then across the street is another piece. And by putting the Illuminaire House right on the corner across from the museum and close to that intersection of two streets, we provided somewhat of what we think of as a residential context. It has street fronts. And then to address some of the climatic challenges of taking this metal box and putting it out in the desert.
By climatic, do you mean weather or like climax?
Like hot.
Okay, hot.
Yeah, which you could take either way, but let's go with like climate, hot. This thing is, going to be, we have to make sure people who go inside are comfortable, and so we put the more transparent, meaning windows and doors and so forth, of the Illuminaire House. Those are oriented, configured, facing to the north towards the street, and then we're looking at putting it in a grove, putting some trees on the south side to protect it from the very intense sun.
So our listeners can follow along. It's now time to Google the Palm Springs Museum of Art, get it on your screen, and then as you look at the front steps of that, just imagine going across the street directly in front of those steps. And I don't think the current Google Maps show the new street that's been connected there, but imagine there's an intersection there, and on the corner, imagine sort of a big, tall cube that is erected there, and that's where you'll be finding the Illuminaire House when it's reconstructed. Now, when is that scheduled to happen approximately?
Well, so the park, we received approval by City Council for the conceptual design of the overall park, including the Illuminaire House, and we are now in schematic design. And we're projecting about a year for the full design and permitting process through 2018, and then starting construction in 2019. So let's say conservatively 2020, the park will be complete, and Mark Davis, who I think you've spoken with, and his team are looking at the logistics of how to re-erect the Illuminaire House within that park construction process. And so 2020, I think we'll have everything in place. Folks will be able to come visit. It's pretty exciting to see the scale. They've done a mock-up during Modernism Week here of where the Illuminaire House will sit and how big it'll be. And so that's the first time now. This is something we've been looking at on paper and in the computer, and you can stand out there and see what its presence will be on that corner. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's really an ingenious little concept. They just took a bunch of scaffolding and built it in the exact shape and scale of the house, and then draped these big banners off the side of it about the Illuminaire House, so you can really conceptualize where it's going to be.
Yep.
Now, I've been coming to Palm Springs for a long time and seeing this site across from the Art Museum, which has had kind of a storied history. They got a parking deck built, but they're big holes in the ground and kind of caverns and things that go nowhere. I mean, what else is going to be in this park once you get your hands on it? And
well, let's go a little deeper on the site history, because this is a really special location. It isn't random that people decide to come to Palm Springs as opposed to any other nook or cranny along the San Jacinto Mountains. The geology of the way all these mountains were pushed up is why the hot springs that give the city its name happen around here, and that attracted the Agua Caliente people agua caliente, for folks who don't speak Spanish. It's hot water. So there's your hot springs. And then you had people coming out here seeking health, right? And you know, there were early sanitariums and so forth for folks with like tuberculosis. And then that over time became an attraction for hospitality. And there was a woman named Nellie Kaufman. And Nellie Kaufman and her husband had what was called the Desert Inn. And he was really committed to the health aspect of it.
Dr. Kaufman.
But the wife had a bigger vision for the future of Palm Springs. And so she really saw this as a place that all people would want to come to for hospitality, to enjoy themselves, to relax from city life. And so I think she divorced him or kicked him out or something, took over the business and set up the Desert Inn right on the site of this park. But a lot of people are really excited about the earlier layers of history. Before then, there was a mall and the parking structure that we've got to work around. That does add some complexity to putting things in the park. We have to think about, we're working with structural engineers and waterproofing and everything to make sure that all of the elements that come in, and now to your question of what else is in the park, we really wanted to draw on that larger natural landscape. So we're calling it an urban oasis. We want the delights and comforts that these intrinsic landscapes can provide. When you go into the canyon, you go into a grove of the native California palms, and it's cool and it's quiet. We know that that's the kind of thing that would be a relief for folks coming from the rest of the city, and especially, you know, when things are hot here. So those types of experiences are going to happen in the park. We also need some attractions for families, for people to come at all times of day, even into the evening. So we've got a water feature play area that's inspired by Tackwitz Falls. We have some shade canopies over lawns and gathering spaces that take some inspiration from the ways that desert people have made like tents and things to make comfort and invitation out of the harsh climate into a place to spend time. We've got a grove of the palms. We've got a stage and an amphitheater for evening movies, events that could go on with things like Modernism Week or the film festival. There's no shortage of cultural events that happen in Palm Springs, so we want the park to be a venue that plugs into that larger cultural landscape. So all of that's happening now. There's one curveball they'll throw at you. There's also going to be a 28-foot tall Marilyn Monroe.
The famous
Forever Marilyn. Yeah.
Oh, is she coming back?
She's coming back.
Now let's go on that for a second, because people who have followed a little bit of esoteric Marilyn trivia have known about this statue for a long time. It's had a storied history and it's kind of been shuttled around the world. I'd heard last it was in Australia.
She's been traveling, but she's back. I think she's in a box somewhere.
She's actually in a box
here.
In a box. Okay.
So and I hate to do this to my Illuminaire House friends because it's two very different audiences, but from a design perspective of creating this park that has this urban oasis vibe, and you have these cultural moments, one, let's call it more highbrow and one more lowbrow, that each have audiences who will come from far away to experience them. And we had to think about giving them each their own appropriate precinct or place in the park without them overwhelming each other or the rest of the park. And so each of them is attached to the park but kind of has their own space.
Own section.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Marilyn is how tall? About
28 feet.
28 feet.
Yeah.
So she's a big girl.
She's a big girl, and her dress or her skirt is blowing up.
Okay,
so
right. The famous scene.
Everybody's always asking about, are you going to light it from below? And so there's a lot of controversy. There's much less controversy about having the Illuminaire House in the park. That I would say there was. This is also right in front of the art museum too. So people take the art world here very seriously.
Yes.
So you have this mix of attractions. So it's been an interesting process to find an overall configuration that would allow all these things to harmoniously work together in the park.
Right.
But I think it's going to be really dynamic. I think, I imagine if I brought my kids here, they'd be excited to see that, and then I can kind of ease them over to the Illuminaire House and start layering and the highbrow stuff.
It's really something for everybody here.
Yeah.
And
that's Palm Springs, too.
Right.
I mean, Palm Springs has that collision of cultures in the midst of this really amplified or intensified natural environment. So
you said conservatively it'd be about 2020 before this all pulls together.
Yes.
If people come out, say, in March of 2019, what are they going to see at that point?
Well, they'll see a bunch of dirt being pushed around.
Okay, so that'll be the push around point. Okay.
Yeah. You can already see it. Where there was a much larger pile of dirt on the Modernism Week campsite, which is the main portion of the park.
Okay.
And rather than pay to have that dragged away and then brought back to make our various outcrops and landforms and amphitheaters in the park, we said, why don't we just hang on to some of that? So they've got that corralled off to the side of the large tents there.
Oh, there's a big dirt pile back in there somewhere?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh,
it's about
wow.
the same size as one of the tents. So.
Really?
Yeah.
I got to go over there and get a photo of the dirt pile.
So that will be eventually pushed somewhere else.
One of my favorite stories from advertising is in the early 60s. They were advertising some sort of kid's army toy.
Uh-huh.
And it was very violent, and this army toy would kill everything in its path. And when they have the closing scene of the commercial, they would show this army toy coming over this big hill. Now, you'd think that there's so much to possibly object to about this toy, but all the discussion that went on in the advertising agency and with the clients and with the attorneys or something was hill not included. So anyway, that's
we're hoping we still get to keep the hill, just not right there.
Well, Nate, thank you so much for dropping by.
Yeah, happy to.
And look forward to seeing really how all this turns out with the Illuminaire House and the Giant Maryland coexisting in the same space.
And the Urban Oasis.
And the Urban Oasis and everything else is going to be great.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers.
Stay with us. There's more to come from US Modernist Radio at Modernism Week.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, coming to you poolside at the Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs, California, where we are in the midst of this wonderful spectacle of architecture called Modernism Week. My guest is Michelle Delk of Snohetta, the architecture firm that if you haven't heard of, you should be Googling it right now, because you're going to be amazed at the projects they have done over about the last 15, 18 years. Michelle is a partner, landscape architect, and discipline director with Snohetta, a firm that has garnered international acclaim for their highly collaborative approach to design, including projects around the world. The Library of Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt, which I've been to and is an amazing building. The expansion of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. The Norwegian National Opera and Ballet in Oslo. Calgary's new Central Library. The National September 11th Memorial Museum Pavilion in New York City, and, of course, the Jim Hunt Library in Raleigh, North Carolina, our favorite. Michelle is here in Palm Springs Modernism Week to talk about a recent project, the Willamette Falls Riverwalk, where she was a central piece of the landscape for that project. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, George. Nice to meet you.
So how did you fall in with such an interesting gang of people at Snohetta?
Oh, gosh. I met Craig Dykers and Elaine Molinar, two of the original partners, in New York City quite a few years ago. I used to work for a firm in Denver, Colorado, a landscape architecture firm. And we would sometimes partner with Snohetta to pursue projects. And so I got to know Craig and Elaine and a few others at Snohetta back during that time frame, and we kept in touch. And a few years ago, they reached out to me and invited me to come be a part of Snohetta, and I've been doing that for the last few years.
Have you been to some of these projects around the world? Have you worked on those?
I've worked on a couple of the ones that you mentioned and have been to some of the others. I've been with Snohetta about 5 years now.
Okay.
So many of the projects you just talked about were well underway or completed when I joined the firm. But the Calgary Library is one of the first projects I was a part of, and led the landscape architecture for that. And it's a wonderful project that we really found a tremendous opportunity. The site itself is essentially bisected in half by a light rail line that goes below ground as it moves through the site. And so the library became an incredible opportunity to design a building and a landscape that could actually bridge that light rail and create places for people to spend time at the library, inside and outside, and to access the library, but also to reconnect these two parts of the city that were really disconnected. So it's been a great project to be a part of, and I go there quite often right now during construction, and we're looking forward to it being complete later this year.
As a person who really isn't an architect or a historian and have just sort of this obsession about it. I think most people don't really understand what landscape architects do, because as normal residents, they're just used to landscape guys in pickup trucks coming along. So tell us a little bit in general about what landscape design does for a building.
Absolutely. Sometimes I'm not quite sure what landscape architects do either, because it's so varied. And I think that's one of the reasons I really became interested in the profession is there's endless opportunity, and it ranges from really large-scale master planning or thinking about planning new communities or redevelopments and thinking at a very high level about public space and streets and parks and plazas and organizing that space to really create interesting places for future development, down to what we often think of, which is the materials that you find in a park or in a garden or even in your backyard, the plants and the hardscape materials and the lighting, and creating an environment that really offers a nice place for people to spend time. So every day is a very, very different day, and every project is a very different project because we think at such a variety of scales.
Well, I think people don't realize that when they walk through, say, a well-crafted park, that somebody actually designed that.
Right.
That bench, which they found to be in just the right place at the right time, didn't just happen by magic.
Absolutely.
Somebody like you made that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even when I was younger, I didn't realize that someone designed the street that you walk down, that someone decided how wide the sidewalk is and where the benches are and the spacing of the trees to provide enough shade or to create an interesting environment. And you do think that it just kind of happens. And partly because the landscape itself is always growing and changing on its own, we're really often putting something in motion that evolves into something else. And that's part of what I love about it.
Tell us about the Willamette Project and where it is and how you get started.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's in Oregon. It's south of Portland, Oregon, in a community called Oregon City. And one of the first things that they taught me when I became involved with the project is that it's Willamette, damn it.
Ah, that's how you remember.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
That's right. So that stuck with me, and I've gotten it right ever since. Yes, absolutely. So the Willamette Falls Riverwalk Project is a site in Oregon City along the Willamette River. It's 22 acres, and for about 150 years it's been an industrial site, so a variety of different industrial uses over the years. And what that's meant is that during that 150 years, there really hasn't been a lot of public access to the riverfront. And one of the really amazing, unique features that's a part of this place is Willamette Falls itself, which is known as the second largest waterfall by volume in North America. So
really?
It is. Yes, it's a tremendous natural feature.
Like after Niagara, maybe?
That's right, after Niagara. And by volume is an important distinguishing feature. It's a very broad, low waterfall that spans all across the river. It's very seasonal, so depending on the time of year and the snowfall, I've seen the waterfall just raging and misty and this incredible, overwhelming experience. And I've also seen it almost dry. And it's also a waterfall that is currently producing hydroelectric power. So Portland General Electric operates the dam there, and they're constantly addressing water levels and flow and maintenance on the dam. So it's a working waterfall that's just a stunning place. So the project began around 2011. The Blue Heron paper mill closed due to bankruptcy. And shortly after that, the property was purchased by a private landowner. And a group of people in the Portland area, several different public agencies, the City of Oregon City, the state, the metropolitan government, and the county, all came together and had the foresight to meet with the landowner and propose that they should work together to promote redevelopment of the site and to also promote bringing public access back to the river and back to the falls. And that in addition to that partnership, they would work very closely with 4 native tribes and with Portland General Electric, who still operates the dam on the site, to really ensure that the future of the site would be something meaningful and rich for everyone involved.
And how big is this site?
So the site itself is about 22 acres. I would say the waterfront of that is probably close to half a mile from the waterfall.
So it's a long strip?
It's a long strip along the water, and then the site extends quite a ways back towards a bluff that's a natural bluff that's part of Oregon City. And they began working together to set forward ideas about a framework for development. They were working very early on with stakeholders and community members to set goals for the project and a set of values that would really be the drivers for the project. And then ultimately they released what's called a request for qualifications, looking for design teams that would be interested in working on the Willamette Falls Riverwalk portion of the future of the site.
How do you get to the site? Do you have to drive there? Is there public transportation? How do you arrive at this strip of land? Today,
you primarily would drive there. Again, it's about 20 miles or so from Portland. There is public transit that gets you pretty close to the site, but that last distance would be either by bike or by car. There's certainly opportunity in the future for nearby water transport. So Portland has water taxis, and the city of Oregon City is interested in having maybe future connections by water. But today, the site is not open to the general public. It is a pretty dangerous site for people to be walking around by themselves. So you can go and visit it via tours right now, and they have to be just careful about people's safety. And so part of our project will ultimately one day be to open this back up to the community.
So what happens first? I mean, do you build the bathroom first? Do you build a little reception center? Are you terraforming all around, reshaping? I mean, how do you go about it?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing that we had to do as a design team is really work with our local partners, and we have really wonderful local teammates. Mara Reed, which is a local landscape architect. We worked in the early phases with Dialogue, an urban design group out of Vancouver, and several people around the Portland area, engineers and community engagement experts. And we had to just start to get to know the site and try to understand it, because if you see images of it, or if you have the opportunity to visit, it's very complex. And we realized really early on that you really need to understand it in all of its three-dimensionality, that it's a place that there's below-ground spaces. If you go out on the water and you look back at the site, you can see this incredible complexity of structures that have been built over time.
It sounds very dramatic.
It's very dramatic. It's very overwhelming.
And we also have violin music somehow coming up behind us, so we'll just let that go on as you tell your story.
Nice. It suits it, I think. Yeah, so the way we began, I mean, the design process is really about investigating the site. It is really overwhelming and really wonderful to explore. And part of what we became really attracted to is the idea that we should really try to retain that mystery and that sense of exploration on the site. Yet we also need to think about how to provide better access and safe access. And the four values that the partners put forward were very important to this process. They proposed that we need to promote economic redevelopment, encourage cultural and historic interpretation, provide public access, and include ecological and habitat restoration. And so our process was really to...
But doesn't every client give you those basic things? I mean, they're pretty general.
They sound really general, right? Absolutely. And we thought so too at first. We thought, yeah, of course we need to do those things. That makes sense. Like, you're not going to fight any of that. But what we found is that as we began to really understand the place ourselves and working with the community members, and we did a lot of really large public outreach. We had hundreds and hundreds of people come to events or respond to online surveys and things like that, that those four core values allowed us to have conversations that made sure that they were all equally considered, that one didn't take priority, because different people are drawn to different aspects.
So, Michelle, you grew up in Iowa.
Yes.
Land of Field of Dreams and corn and things like that.
Absolutely.
And we were talking earlier, sometimes our parents don't really understand what we do. What do your parents think you do? I mean, what do they think you do as part of Snohetta? Do they kind of get it, or?
They have inklings of what I do. Yeah. I think that they believe that mostly I fly around the country and I go to meetings. And I
Because
get
they can see that, right? Yeah, presentations.
And, that's pretty accurate. I spend quite a lot of time doing that, so they understand that. Over the years, we, of course, talk about the different projects that I'm involved with in the different cities, and I think they're quite fascinated just with the process and hearing about the conversations and the way the people I spend a lot of time talking to, which is a really important part of the profession to me, so I probably talk about that a lot. I don't know that they fully understand the landscape architecture design side of it, because as a kid, I certainly had never even heard of a landscape architect, and you don't really find all that many landscape architects in Iowa, so it's a little bit foreign to them.
Yeah, I guess, on that list of fireman, astronaut, stockbroker, landscape architect doesn't pop up there as much.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But the people that are really good at this, like you, it's really a whole new universe that opens up of being able to shape these spaces into things that people appreciate without even knowing what's going on. I think of, for instance, the High Line in New York City. Now everybody looks at it like it's been there forever.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And yet that whole expanse was, of course, very meticulously crafted.
Of course, yeah.
Every bit of railing, every bit of tile, every plant selection.
Sure.
You look at it as just a member of Joe and Jane Public and go, that seems like that was the right place to do that.
And that's in many ways, I think, what indicates success in my mind. That of course, we see our work as really creative and really bringing new ideas and new experiences and a lot of opportunity to re-envision places that sometimes have been left behind or have just been, overlooked. But in the end, when we make someplace new, and people think that it's inevitable, that it's just natural, that it's there, I find that to actually be a pretty good indicator that we did what we were hoping to do. If people just adopt it and make it their own and want to be there and begin to take their families there or meet their friends there for coffee, that makes me feel like I did what I was trying to do.
Well, where we're from in North Carolina, there's a building called the Jim Hunt Library, which I think is 5 or 6 years old now.
Yeah.
That is one of Raleigh's most astonishing buildings by far. It's really spectacular. But I'm always amazed in this greater triangle community of, I think we're up to 1.5 million, something like that, that if you ask the average person if they've ever been over to the Jim Hunt Library, it's no. Some even don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
So, it's a matter of that even when you create this terrific building and also the grounds around it, what I'm fascinated by Snohetta's design is the ability to create many, many sizes of spaces inside and outside the building. You can have a gathering for 400, you can have a gathering for 3, it can be inside, it can be outside, you can sort of wrap around the building, and you come up on this thing, and it looks like, the derogatory term is, it looks like it landed from outer space.
Oh, right? It is a little different than everything around it.
Than anything, because most everything else in NC State is brick. But on the other hand, it's nice to have something from outer space that is so beautiful that just descended right into campus.
Yeah.
This building is, besides being a library and a media center and offices, is also headquarters for several organizations that work throughout NC State. So thank you so much for bringing us that building in our area.
Well, you're welcome. I think something that's really exciting about the work that Snohetta gets involved with is that we not only take very seriously what we're being asked to do, so the program and the function of a building or a landscape that we're being asked to design, but we look for opportunities to provide something that is more than what we were asked for, to have something that kind of provides generosity back to the public or the client and the community. And the library that you're talking about, one of the things that I love about it is, at the time especially, it was a really unusual system to decide to store the books in the way that they are, rather than on shelves throughout the library. To use that automated system that allows books to be stored in a much smaller area meant that the library itself could offer back a lot more public space and gathering space and those variety of spaces that you're talking about.
So if you're wondering what she's referring to, imagine a giant warehouse with little robots scampering back and forth and getting the books out of the shelves. So you don't need all the square footage for people to go back and forth and be filing books and bumping into things. These little bots go and get the books and bring them back out, and then you return the books, and the bots put them back where they go. And although it's a fairly cavernous space where the books reside, it's much less volume than if it was spread out across a traditional building. So it's a brilliant way to store all these things and keep them safe and keep them in the right climate control and all of that.
Absolutely.
Really amazing building. So what are we going to see popping out of the ground with Snohetta over the next few years? What's on your radar as a firm?
Well, we talked about the Calgary Library, which will open later this year, so we're very excited and looking forward to that. In the next few years, we're working on a nice project in Midtown Manhattan, which is the renovation of an existing privately owned public space. So in Manhattan, this is pretty common. There are these spaces that are maintained and operated by a private landowner or entity, but they're open to the public. And so we're working on one right now in Midtown that today is a pretty dark covered space. It's covered overhead. It's glass, but it's still enclosed, and it's also closed on either end. And we're in early phases of design to open that entirely up and create an entirely new garden that's very lush and has a lot of different size of spaces and places for people to gather. So we're hopeful that will continue forward. We're also working in downtown Honolulu in Hawaii. So one of my plane rides relatively frequently is to go to Honolulu, and we're working with a great team there on the Blaisdell Center. And the Blaisdell Center is home today to an existing theater and an arena that hosts a lot of music events. There's exhibit halls and spaces that are really for the community to come and have local events. And even almost everyone in Hawaii goes to this for their high school graduations, which is a really big deal. So it's a really deeply connected part of their culture. And so we've been working and recently completed a master plan to look at how to renovate and upgrade some of the existing facilities and replacement of some of the facilities that are outdated. And we're moving into the next phases of design, working with a group called AECOM and with a local architecture firm called WCIT and many, many others on that effort. And something I'm really excited about with that is not only the opportunity to renovate these existing structures and provide the new facilities, but today the site itself, which is also around 20 acres, is really largely parking lots and driveways. And so our design is proposing putting a lot of that circulation and service infrastructure below ground. We're actually lifting the ground in order to do that, so that almost everything on the surface at the street level is going to be new gardens and new gathering spaces and really creating an outdoor environment that's really inviting and really a part of that cultural destination.
Well, I know it's going to be great when it gets going.
I'm excited about it.
If you want to see a really profound example of the fusion of outdoor space and indoor space, architecture and landscape architecture, Google Snohetta's project in Oslo, the National Opera. It's really a fascinating building. I've gotten a chance to visit there. You should try to put that on your radar as well. Thank you so much, Michelle, for dropping by and joining us here at the pool.
Absolutely.
And have a great rest of your week here in Palm Springs.
Thank you. Wonderful to talk to you.
As always, thanks for listening. Hey, want to go to Modernism Week in Palm Springs next year and hang out with the cool kids? Plus George Smart? Send an email to george@ncmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses. You can reach her at 919-995-0550. Okay, Tomas, take us out.
Visit USModernist.org to listen to previous shows and discover our massive mid-century modernist archives. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not a real name, researches guests from a secret underground bunker very close to Whole Foods. US Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Stay tuned for more shows from Modernism Week on US Modernist Radio.